Paradise Inn is one of the wonderful accommodations within any national park, and I think that's part of why it has endured as a favorite place for lots of people.
There's a real sense of spirit here and a sense of ownership. And Timberline is sort of every Oregonian's mountain home, we call it.
It's part of the old turn-of-the-century resort complex where people got away from it all, whether you might view it as a refuge in a way. Both the cave and the chateau served as a refuge from the busy life even at that time.
I think the greatest gift that you get from Crater Lake is the opportunity to sit at this lodge on the edge of a caldera and contemplate the sunset and the sunrise.
Production of Great Lodges of the National Parks was brought to you in part by M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Seattle personifies the pioneering spirit of the Pacific Northwest. Sandwiched between the Puget Sound and the rugged terrain of the Cascade Mountain Range, it is a major metropolis bordered by some of America's most beautiful natural areas and shadowed by one of the world's great mountains.
Mount Rainier is the icon of the Northwest. You can see it from the east side, from the west side, from Seattle, Tacoma, even from Portland, Oregon. When people think of national parks, they think of Mount Rainier as one of the finest examples of that.
It's certainly a great lump of a mountain, a beautiful white cupcake sitting over there on the horizon. Rainier is really fundamental to our sense of place here in the Northwest, those of us who live here.
Paradise Inn is an opportunity for the public to come here and slow down and experience a little bit of the old world. But the Paradise Inn and the meadows of paradise and the views of the mountain all are just intertwined, and it creates an experience that's unforgettable.
Mount Rainier National Park was established in 1899 and the inn built in 1916 at the dawn of the National Park Service. Paradise Inn represents an early attempt to provide comfortable accommodations inside a national park. At a time when many other park lodges were being financed by the railroads, Paradise Inn took another route.
The railroads had a great influence on early park development. They not only influenced the settlement of the West, but they also started the tourist movement and brought people out to the West to see it. In the Pacific Northwest, the railroads couldn't make the grade up to the high mountain areas that the public wanted to be at. So instead of having the major railroads developing these parks, we had little entrepreneurs.
There were some like 42 concessioners. So there were people all over the place, opportunists taking advantage of this wonderful environment and encouraging people to come and pay them money for the privilege of staying here in various kinds of tent camps and other accommodation.
Paradise Inn largely owes its existence to Stephen Mather, the first director of the National Park Service. He was dismayed by the carnival atmosphere of competing concessionaires at Rainier. He envisioned a seamless park experience.
Stephen Mather came out here to try to address some of these issues. He gathered local businessmen from Tacoma and Seattle. They did a tour around the park. Then they went back to the Rainier Club in Seattle, and he sort of laid the cards on the table. And he said, "We've got some problems here."
Mather convinced them that they needed to raise money to build a lodge at Mount Rainier and to have a single private concessionaire running the lodge on Park Service lands. In 1916, the Rainier National Park Company was formed and work began on Paradise Inn. Patterned after European lodges, the inn is dominated by its massive three-story shingled roof. Likened to a Swiss chalet, its alpine design fits well with its environment.
The structural elements expressed on the interior and exterior in their native form express the natural features of the park. We have the timbers that we see that came from the forests around here. They represent the trees right here at Timberline.
Ironically, it was an 1885 forest fire which unexpectedly provided the distinctive timbers for the construction of Paradise Inn.
But it went through quickly enough that it didn't destroy the heart of the wood. It just really pretty much burned the bark and killed the trees. It was called the Silver Forest because they had weathered to a wonderful silver color. Here's some of the examples. These are the columns in the building that support the frame, and we have our own silver forest here in the lobby and in the dining room of the inn. The mezzanine in the Great Hall, the lobby of this wonderful building, was added primarily for structural support. The building itself is trying to resist immense world record snowfalls that we get up here at Paradise.
In the lobby here, on days when you can't see the mountain, you get an experience of being in the forest. It brings the outdoors in, and you don't leave it. We have the massive stone fireplaces that came from the mountain and represent the mountain and the massive geological elements.
One of the inn's distinctive features is the original handmade furniture, all crafted by German carpenter Hans Franke.
He started coming up for 7 years crafting furniture from the local Alaskan yellow cedar and making this wonderful furniture. He trudged up here in the spring when the snows relented enough to let him get up here, and spent all summer and into probably around November when he was chased out by the weather. He did a series of park benches with tables that are along the window wall in the front of the inn, and those things are about 6-8 feet long. And the tables are 1,500 pounds of solid log, and several of the tables are literally just half a slab. The top has been cut off, and the lower part is rounded. This is an example of one of the things that Hans Franke did for us. This piano is an upright piano that was completely clad in logs. I like to think of the huge jackknife that it would have taken to sharpen these pencils. And under this wonderful roll top is a keyboard. We've been told that Truman came in and sat down here and played this piano for us for, I guess, an evening event while he was here visiting in the park. So it sort of exemplifies what a special thing this is for us to have here at Paradise Inn.
The inn features two types of lampshades in the main hall. The small conical lampshades near the ceiling date from the 1930s. The larger lampshades are a simple design made of parchment paper and painted with wild flowers native to the park. By the mid-'80s, the original set of shades had become too worn for more than 50 years of use. Dale Thompson, a retired park naturalist and wildlife artist, was called in to paint new ones.
Some 2 years after I left the National Park Service and had begun my new business in wildlife art, the park staff approached me about my interest in painting new lampshades to replace those that had hung here for 50 years. And it had a great deal of appeal to me because it was an opportunity to give something back to an organization that had been good to me for some 20 years of my life. I was required to do these new shades of the very same materials as the originals, using the heavy tagboard and lacing them to the metal hoops with raffia. I had to work in the very same art medium, which was just good old school children's tempera. There were a total of 74 shades, and so I literally had to shut down my wildlife art business for a period of between 3 and 4 months to complete them. I still consider Mount Rainier and Paradise my second home. It's wonderful for me to come up here to enjoy the parks now like just any other visitor, but also to come up to this historic building, and it's particularly gratifying for me to know that the lampshades I painted for the inn may be here for another 50 years, and that leaves me with a good feeling.
Adorned with over 25 glaciers, Mount Rainier is one of the highest mountains in the continental United States. A testament to the conflicting forces that created it, it is a volcano covered with ice.
Mount Rainier has more ice on it than all of the Cascade volcanoes combined. And there's no place quite like that in the lower 48, where you can, with a short walk or even a drive, be able to see glaciers like North America was covered with 10,000 years ago.
These glaciers are the reason there is a Mount Rainier National Park. The study and preservation of these rivers of ice is what led to the formation of the park at the turn of the century. One of the largest, the Nisqually, extends all the way to the summit and begins just a short walk from Paradise Inn.
Nisqually Glacier is probably one of the most studied glaciers in the United States. It's the main glacier on the south flank of the mountain, comes down past Paradise. You've got good, clean ice and snow at the top, and as you move further down, it becomes more and more concentrated with debris. You'll also notice that every time it goes around a bend or over a ridge or something, it'll form crevasses. That the river flowing out of it is very, very milky or muddy in color, and that's due to the debris that's been ground up by the glacier.
The park has a lot of variety. It's old-growth forests, glaciers, wildlife, beautiful wildflowers. It's an experience that's not to be missed.
I think often we want the weather to be sunny and clear, but really there's a lovely soft quality on a wet day with the world kind of closed in upon itself.
Ruth Kirk has lived in the Pacific Northwest for over 40 years and has written books about national parks and wilderness areas. One of them, Sunrise to Paradise, is a celebration of the history and beauty of Mount Rainier.
Well, you know, there are people that think Rainier is a myth because it doesn't show every day, but it's not a hussy that's going to just show it all every day. There are days it just is being very quiet and behind the cloak of the gray sky. I certainly enjoy wandering around under those circumstances in the forest or up in the high country at Paradise. The flowers get all spotted with the droplets, and sometimes you'll see perhaps a deer wandering through the mist, oblivious of it. I think the deer is not yearning for sunshine at all. It takes it as it comes.
After a day on the mountain or in the meadows, visitors are grateful for the warmth of Paradise Inn. Its rustic charm complements the park experience.
Everybody has a perception when they come to these types of facilities. You need to be willing to experience the outdoor. That's what these facilities were built for. Not necessarily as hotels, but more of a place to rest during the evening. Spend your daytime out in the park enjoying the nature. These buildings are not full of the modern conveniences, telephones, TVs. We don't have them.
I'm not sure that television would really enhance your experience of the mountain. You might then be tempted to stay in and watch some sitcom instead of watch the sunset. The things that you can do somewhere else, do them somewhere else, and come to the mountain for the special qualities that it has to offer.
Nothing makes me feel better than to see people and families and international visitors just sitting in the lodge, enjoying the fireplace, enjoying their families, and feeling very comfortable.
I think the inn has charm and appeal to us, partly because it is old. Something that is old, that is familiar, that's the same building that our parents, grandparents saw, that has a great appeal.
About an hour and a half's drive east of Portland, sits Oregon's highest mountain, Mount Hood. Like Rainier, it is one of the volcanic peaks of the Northwest Cascade Range. Perched 6,000 feet up the south side of the mountain is the awesome Timberline Lodge, an amazing achievement born on the heels of one of America's darkest moments.
Timberline was built in the Depression, and I think it still stands as a symbol of hard work and determination and quality.
What it reflects at the time of our history, the Great Depression, and the American public's willingness and ability to recover from that.
And all Americans should be proud of what we can do when we pull together on something like that and given the opportunity to do it and to do our very best.
In the early 1930s, America was reeling in the midst of the Great Depression.
It was a crisis in this country, unparalleled other than the Civil War. And Franklin Roosevelt was elected to office in part because he promised to bring the country out of that. The hotel is a product of its time. I mean, you had recreation growing, you had skiing industry that was clamoring for this opportunity for a hotel on a mountain. You had the Great Depression, and then FDR's response to that in the New Deal.
Part of the New Deal was the Works Progress Administration. The WPA was charged with funding projects that could employ and train an American workforce decimated by the Depression. Timberline Lodge was intended to teach new trades to hundreds of workers. Unlike other lodges, it was built with public money and on Forest Service lands, not in a national park. Construction began in 1935 with more than 600 trainees taking part. Timberline was completed in 1937 and dedicated by President Roosevelt.
One of the design schemes for the building and one of the parameters was to use local materials. They wanted to showcase local materials in the construction as well as local artisans and craftsmen and architects in developing the lodge. The lodge itself, it grows right out of the mountain, the way it's been designed and sited on the mountain.
Timberline's original structure has remained virtually unchanged for over 60 years. Built in 3 main sections, the 2 side wings are joined by an enormous 3-story hexagonal head house, featuring a center 80-foot-high chimney with 3 hearths on each floor.
The main head house fireplace is sort of the central focus of the building. The rock work is so big and massive that it seems to be the focal point for the whole room. This is my favorite room of the whole building, and we call it the heart of the mountain area. And the fireplace is all the original rock work and the handling wrought iron, and you've got the wonderful handrails that are made out of the railroad tracks. The room itself has the same 6 sides, and the fireplace has the same 6 sides, and the big tall pillars have the same 6 sides. So it's a great way to see that the architects and the blueprints and the craftsmen all work together hand in hand.
Echoing the hexagonal theme, 3 massive iron chandeliers light the main level. The head house is also home to the Cascade Dining Room. And on the upper level, the Ram's Head Bar, one of 2 in the lodge. The upper level also has a dining area featuring several little nooks and alcoves, and Depression-era art decorates nearly every wall.
There were a number of artists on the WPA project who are of national stature.
Howard Sewell painted a number of oil paintings for the lodge, including 2 large murals that were used in the Cascade Dining Room for many years. In this room, the Blue Ox Bar, there are glass murals that were executed by Virginia Darcy. First she did drawings and then cut the glass to fit in place. They show Paul Bunyan and his Blue Ox Babe.
It was a real renaissance in art in America during the Roosevelt time, and this building is a personification of that. The WPA had a teaching component to it. So they had some good lead craftsmen up here, but they were also teachers and taught other people to be ironsmiths and wood carvers and weavers.
Dick Constam came to Timberline in 1955, at a time when the legacy of the early artisans was in danger of being lost. Years of mismanagement had plunged Timberline into debt and disrepair, and it was closed in 1954. After becoming the concessionaire, Dick's RLK company reopened the lodge and began a long process of restoring it to its original beauty. Known affectionately to the staff as RL, his vision is what has made the lodge the success it is today.
We've tried hard to keep the building looking the same as it has in the past, and I think people like that. It reminds them of when they were here before, because it is the same, and we don't change it.
Once the structural problems were addressed, Dick faced an even bigger challenge. The lodge's fabrics, rugs, and handmade artwork had all become tattered and worn. Neither Dick or the Forest Service could afford to replace them with handmade items. So, the people of Oregon came to the rescue.
Friends of Timberline was established in 1975 by a group of people in Portland that loved the lodge, were avid skiers, longtime family history in Portland and Oregon. And they saw the lodge in a condition that was unacceptable, and they really took the task.
Friends of Timberline was the last piece. Today, this unique triumvirate of the Forest Service, the Friends Group, and the concessionaire ensure the future of Timberline Lodge.
Here you've got one of the biggest agencies in the country, a small private company, relatively small private company, and a tiny nonprofit do-good, all contributing to do a part of a job that nobody could afford to do before.
We always try to maintain the historic integrity using the same fabrics, using the same techniques, and in some cases using the same people.
I've always looked at this place like a big dollhouse.
Linnie Adamson was first hired to loom fabrics for Friends of Timberline in 1975. She quickly fell in love with the lodge and has been involved ever since. As curator, she oversees the upkeep and preservation of Timberline's handmade arts and crafts.
Friends of Timberline sponsored craftsmen for a number of years, and still do, to replace things that were missing from the lodge originally. What's unique to us is that the craftsmen really never stopped creating for the building. Here we still believe on the hands-on, and we're not faking it. We don't have to play like we're candle makers or weavers or blacksmiths. We're actually living it.
True to its WPA roots, Timberline is now training a whole new generation of volunteers in restoring and maintaining its handmade artwork.
We're restoring the wood. So first what we're doing is doing a light cleaning, and then we're going to go back over it with some oils. Everything in this building is hand done, handcrafted. There are no machined pieces. And I think that's why it's a world-class building.
Some of the most significant craft work in the lodge is its hand-forged iron. Original items like the zigzag-framed chandeliers in the head house complement more recent additions like the iron banisters with pine cone finials installed for safety. All of this ironwork is in the charge of blacksmith extraordinaire Darrell Nelson.
The really special thing about Timberline as opposed to ironwork in other places is that most of the smiths that worked at Timberline weren't ornamental or architectural or decorative smiths. They were smiths from the railroad or logging company smiths. And the work reflects that in its mass and in its simplicity to perform the task that it's been made to do.
The original ironwork was designed and built by Timberline's first blacksmith, O.B. Dawson. 40 years later, he trained an amateur blacksmith named Russell Moggins, who restored and refinished the many pieces of ironwork in the 70s. Today, Darrell carries the baton for a new generation of iron enthusiasts.
I feel the obligation to pass on what I've learned as Russell passed on to me and OB passed on to him. And so it's one of the things that give me the most pleasure from this business is passing the knowledge on to young people. Well, Ram's Heads has kind of been a logo of Friends of Timberline. We started making these Ram's Heads in 1985 to sell, to earn funds to upkeep the lodge. There it is. Even with the Friends of Timberline and the funding that they come up with, there's so many things to spend it on that sometimes we forget to send in a bill. And at those times, I feel like a preservationist.
I think people come here first and foremost for the skiing, for the snowboarding, to play in the snow, for the hiking, the climbing, the easy access to the outdoors.
It's a lot of fun living and working up here in the mountains.
Jason Smith is the executive sous chef at Timberline. Like many employees here, whenever he gets a break from work, he likes to take to the slopes of Mount Hood.
I guess I describe myself as a little bit more of a freestyle skier than like a racer. I like to hit jumps. I like hitting big turns on wide open spaces too. That's one of the things I like about skiing up at Timberline. Our guys that are doing our dishes in our dish room for us, you'll turn around and you'll see them every day as they're just being their dishwashers. Then all of a sudden you'll see them out on the slopes. They're all really good. A lot of talented people up here. If I go skiing before work, it's just for an hour or two, then head into work for another 8. We do that a lot throughout the season.
Okay, let's see. We have a lot of things going on this weekend, especially the Cloud Cap party up at the...
Food at Timberline is in the charge of Master Chef Leif Benson. He is known as a true pioneer of Northwest cuisine.
Everything that we do here makes a difference to me. So what happens in the morning and at breakfast and at lunch and when I'm not here makes a difference to me. We're looking for creating a very unique Northwest experience, not just coming up for food. Our challenge here is to make it unique enough where that it will be a different presentation, different preparation than probably anywhere else. Let's say, are you we're probably about 20 minutes from dessert? Okay, I think we're about ready to go.
The reason I wanted to have this dinner tonight is to kind of celebrate and thank the triumvirate that's made Timberline such a success, and that's Friends of Timberline and the U.S. Forest Service. We've done this together, and it's a big success. Cheers.
Timberline is an amazing achievement. From its work's progress roots through its decline and revitalization, it has spanned the years with great dignity and glory. It stands today as a symbol of America's artistic heritage and of Oregon's pride.
There's a real sense of spirit here and a sense of ownership. And Timberline is sort of every Oregonian's mountain home, we call it.
I think people get a personal kick out of showing visitors from out of town how they have something special in Oregon that they can point with pride to.
330 miles to the south of Timberline, tucked away in southwestern Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains, is one of the state's best-kept secrets. Oregon Caves is among this country's first national monuments, set aside in 1909 to preserve the marble caverns that delve deep into the mountainside. They are adjoined by the Oregon Caves Chateau, a bark-covered lodge that seems to have grown out of the forest as naturally as the trees that surround it. Its remote location makes it the least known of the lodges of the Pacific Northwest.
The chateau is an integral part of the whole landscape here.
It's a neat old resort, emblematic of the old resorts around the turn of the century, a refuge, if you will, a place to rest and recuperate and get away from it all.
It's quiet. Oh, the quiet. There'll be very few places where you'll go that absolute quiet.
Completed in 1934, the 10-sided, 6-story structure sprouts up from a ravine and seems to be a natural part of its environment. The chateau was the vision of a local, virtually unknown contractor, a man named Gust Liam.
He happened to be a very skilled carpenter who could also serve as contractor. He had enough talent to do architectural design. And you have to say, when you look at Oregon Cave Chateau, that it's a brilliant piece of work. Just describing it, it's so irregular. All of its sides are different. The window shapes and sizes are very different. Doors are different, and yet the thing works.
Gus Liam knew the area, knew the materials, so that made a difference. There was a master plan by the Forest Service, but he found the spot, the ravine. And what he looked at was a way of being environmentally sensitive, of providing a very low-story facade as you approach the building, and then to tumble the building down the hillside. So because he built in this area, he knew how to pick the lumbers, pick the finished materials, and really make it all work on a site. The stairwell, as an example, uses all the local materials. They're orchestrated. There's a crescendo of the large, massive posts of Doug fir. Then there are the carrying elements that support the stairs. You know you're in the Siskiyou Forest, in a rustic setting, and all of it absolutely blends, so the colors absorb and the light bounces off it. The fireplace, which is rather unusual, being double-sided, is a massive stone that goes directly down to the foundation. Liam saw a way of relating the flow of water down into the building by actually channelizing a flow through the floor of the living room and then out into the ravine. So the waterfall that trickles over the edge into a lagoon then is channelized down under the floor of the dining room, so that while you're sitting there, you can hear the water. So you're looking at the walls of glass out into the ravine, and then the water flowing and the continuous sound of the waterfall is part of the rusticity, part of the character of the place.
A few steps downstairs provide a trip back in time to the Oregon Caves Cafe. Added to the chateau 20 years after it opened, it harkens back to the days of soda jerks and bobby socks. Its vinyl stools and soda machines are all original. Dating back to the mid-50s, these are some of the newest items in the building. Most of the furniture in the chateau dates back to its opening in the 30s. In keeping with the style of this bucolic time capsule, nearly all of it is of a rustic, mission-inspired design called Monterey. Designed in the 20s, it has been rediscovered and is collected by enthusiasts all over the West. Geraldine Ness is an authority on Monterey furniture.
So this is where it all started. This is my first piece of Monterey, and it's what sent me on my mission to find out who made Monterey and what this furniture is all about. I found my first piece of Monterey in an antique store, and I had no idea what it was. It was stamped Monterey on the back, and it had a horseshoe on it. And it was closed up, and it looked like an old chest made out of oak with heavy metal strapping, and I thought it was just wonderful. I learned that George Mason created Monterey furniture, and he was alive and in his 80s, and he lived in Santa Cruz.
Geraldine continued to research and buy the furniture. Then, while vacationing one weekend at Oregon Cave Chateau, she stumbled onto one of the largest collections of Monterey in the world.
My husband was signing us in, and I was looking around the lobby, and all of a sudden I noticed the furniture in the lobby, and I went, oh my God, what is this? And I went racing over to the furniture, got down on my knees, and I'm turning it upside down to see if it has any branding on it. And sure enough, all the furniture was branded. It had the horseshoe, it had the Monterey. I believe the Chateau's collection is the largest public collection and should be preserved and retained.
The inn's collection of Monterey was once much larger. In 1964, the dining room furniture was lost in a catastrophic event that nearly destroyed the chateau.
I arrived here in 1964 to take over as general manager for the Oregon Caves Company.
Harry Christensen had just taken over as the lodge's manager, and after a successful summer season, he was supervising the lodge for the winter with his wife and assistant manager Bob Hines. By mid-December, near-record snowfall was followed by a freak winter rainstorm, causing massive flooding in the hills above the chateau.
I was looking out the window of my apartment, which was on the second floor of this hotel, and I noticed that there was a trickle of water coming through the archway of the chalet. When I suddenly said to Bob, I said, "What's that noise?" And he looked at me and his eyes popped open and he says, "I don't know what it is, but run." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Run, get out of here." He went scrambling up the stairways to his apartment. I ran down the driveway. All I can remember of that at the moment is a big log chasing me. I later made firewood out of that log. It was 48 inches in diameter.
The sudden winter flooding loosed tons of water and debris down on the chateau. When it was over, the 3 lower floors were filled with mud and rocks.
I had a meeting with the board of directors, and I said, "I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies. It's too bad, but the chateau is gone. Dining room is ruined. Coffee shop is a mess. The kitchen is full of mud. Everything downstairs," I said, "is completely covered. I wouldn't give you a nickel for the place." And I said, "I'm through."
The directors, however, would not give up so easily. They ordered Harry to get the chateau in working order. Luckily, Gust Liam, the man who had built the chateau 30 years earlier, was still alive, and with his help, Harry hired crews and began rebuilding. Liam would pass away just a few months after work was completed in the spring of 1965.
Believe it or not, we did it. On the 26th of May, we opened this hotel back in the same condition, literally, that it was before the flood.
At 480 acres, Oregon Caves is among the smallest national monuments in the United States.
By the way, does everybody know what this animal here is?
John Roth is the natural resources specialist at the monument and is an authority on the Oregon Caves.
Caves tell us a lot because they're a three-dimensional window into the past and under the earth, so they expose things in 3 dimensions, and especially they don't have any vegetation to cover them over, so all the geology is exposed, what geologists call 100% exposure, which is a geological dream. The end result in this particular cave, we can see over 200 million years of geological activity exposed in the walls of the cave.
So going up the stairway, stay to your left, don't hit your head.
Visitors to the park are taken through the caves in groups of 16 on a 90-minute tour. Filled with fascinating and often very unusual formations, the caves offer a glimpse at the Earth's interior decoration.
Another neat thing about this cave is the bedrock itself is very complicated and illustrates perhaps the most complicated geology in America in this region. The best known formations in the cave are these kind of composite drapery stalagmites that are also a form of flowstone, as if the rock is actually flowing downhill.
The chateau's warm, golden ambience is as deep as the forest that surrounds it. The rough stone of the fireplace, peeled log beams, and wood paneling create an aura as mysterious as the caves from which it gets its name. None of the 23 guest rooms are alike, and nearly all feature distinctive Monterey furniture. The chateau remains virtually unchanged since it opened in the 30s, a comfortable, old-world resort stuck in a time warp.
They haven't tried to modernize it too much. I mean, like these light fixtures that are over here, I would swear those are the same ones that were here when we were working here. They look the same.
Dick and Kathy Gordon first met at the caves in 1963. He was a cave guide, she worked in the gift shop. Over the 2 years they worked at the caves, they formed a romance that resulted in their marriage in 1965. Today, Dick is the general manager of the chateau.
If you were going out on a date today to a movie, you may talk to your date maybe 5 minutes all evening because you're being entertained by something else. You get up here, you're your own entertainment, and you really get to know your significant other very, very quickly.
After working in 63 and then 64, then we got married the summer of 65, and then we came here for our wedding night.
There is no difference today to the cave or to this property from the mid-1950s. It's like time standing still. It just never changes.
I really don't know any place else in the whole world that's as untouched by time as this place is, and I hope it stays that way.
I think that humans have a potentially fatal flaw, and that is that we become obsessed with ourselves too much. And both the natural beauty of the cave and the natural beauty of the chateau helps us get away from ourselves.
I love the place, and I'll always love it. It's a beautiful place, and it's a wonderful thing, and thank God it's still here.
"130 miles northeast of Oregon Caves, near the point where the Siskiyou Mountains converge with the southern peaks of the Cascade Range, is Crater Lake. Cupped in 500,000 years of volcanic accumulation, the Midnight Blue Lake is one of nature's most majestic surprises.
Crater Lake National Park is one of those places for me where I go to and I have a feeling come over me. When I come up that rim and I get the first view of the lake, you know, it's a euphoric feeling for me.
Where else can you spend the night on the edge of a caldera made by a mighty eruption over 7,000 years ago and contemplate the sunset and the sunrise? I mean, there aren't very many places like this.
The rehabilitation has made the lodge complete. Basically, for the first time in history, today is really the finest hour of Crater Lake Lodge.
Crater Lake is a caldera, a vast crater left behind by a volcanic eruption. Where there's now a crater, there was once a mountain over 12,000 feet tall.
The eruption that occurred 7,700 years ago was epic, one of the largest to occur in this part of the world for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years.
It wasn't until the middle 19th century that the first American prospectors stumbled onto the caldera. In 1885, the lake was visited by a man who would become the founder of Crater Lake National Park, William Gladstone Steele.
And as the story goes, back in Kansas, he looked at a newspaper that wrapped his lunch and saw an article on Crater Lake and resolved that he was going to come out and he was going to see Crater Lake. And once he did, he worked tirelessly until Crater Lake was established as a national park in 1902.
Steel became the park's first concessionaire, but early tent villages he set up did not match his grand dreams for the area. In 1909, he teamed up with a Portland developer to build a lodge on the rim of Crater Lake. The lodge would open some 5 years later, but the construction never really ended. The next 60 years would be a long misadventure of patching and repairing a crumbling monolith.
The lodge's problems stem from, the typical business failure. Reason is undercapitalization. The concessionaire who became involved with it didn't have enough money. He didn't know what he was into. So, not enough money to start with. A very short construction season, even when it was underway, conspired to produce a lodge that was dramatically underbuilt and took forever to be completed.
It was continuously under construction. Back from the time of World War I on through the 1920s into the 1930s, it was in varying stages of construction, and it was never actually really completed.
A tattered building was not enough to keep it from becoming a very special place to the people of the Northwest. The lodge provided accommodations next to one of the world's true wonders. Russell Sadler's connection with the lodge began in 1965 when he came to Crater Lake and spent a summer as a wine steward in the lodge's dining room.
You worked from 7 in the morning, 9:30 at night. There were little breaks during the day, but resort life hasn't changed. You work day and night. The lodge is the key to access to the lake, particularly the kind of time you need to spend to get a sense of this place.
Eventually, even its extraordinary location was not enough. By the 70s and 80s, the structural problems were beginning to add up, and Crater Lake was in danger of losing its historic lodge.
The lodge is a pretty old building, and as time went by, it would kind of move and creak and groan with the snow in the winter, and it was getting so heavy on the roof that it was kind of flattening out the building, and the walls were bowing out.
It was a decrepit old derelict. It was in really sorry shape.
It was not an option to simply restore the old lodge as it existed. It was already being held up by wire rope and cables.
Crater Lake Lodge had become unsafe and was facing demolition in 1984. There would be no lodge today were it not for a local public outcry that led to its complete reconstruction. Like at Timberline, it was the will and determination of the people of Oregon that came to the rescue. At the head of this campaign was the Historic Preservation League of Oregon and Eric Eisman.
We ended up with over 4,000 testimonials, postcards, letters that just came flooding into the office from people telling us about their experiences at the lodge and why those experiences were important in their lives. So, armed with that information, we went back to the National Park Service and said, look at this. This is unanimous support.
The Park Service got the message, and in 1991, Congress funded a rehabilitation that would finally make the original idea of Crater Lake Lodge a reality.
The first thing we did was identify the character-defining features of the historic lodge, and we decided to retain all of those character-defining features in the rehabilitation.
There was a combination of reconstruction, rehabilitation, and restoration. So it was a combination of all those three elements that came together with the lodge.
From the outside, the new lodge looks just like the old. But inside, it's a modern hotel, which preserves many of the original's features.
The stone fireplace, which is an historic element and a character-defining feature in the dining room and in the Great Hall, were identified and numbered before we took them down, each individual stone, and then those were put aside again, and then once ready, they were put back exactly as they were. Other elements include the log handling inside, and those are actually segments of large logs that were cut and then placed as a finished material on the inside of the lobby, the Great Hall, and the dining room.
Another major element is the historic stair inside the Great Hall, and it was a peeled log stair. We used the major log components to use as in the reconstruction of the stair.
The lodge's central Great Hall forms a natural meeting area where people can relax, read a book, or wait for a table in the grand dining room. The new lodge opened in 1995, and unlike the original, it is built to last. The most popular gathering area is the large terrace balcony that faces the rim. It's the perfect place for watching the sunset or sunrise with a cup of coffee.
I think staying in lodges is a great thing to do because they're such an important part of our history and a part of what made this country, these great places that we have that are so valuable and to be cherished.
You know, I think the scale of it is what sort of surprises you most. I didn't expect it to be quite this big. And the blue of the water, which everybody talks about. It's magnificent.
John and Mary Jane Toohey have visited several lodges throughout America, but this is their first trip to Crater Lake.
Ahoy, welcome aboard.
They've chosen to take the hour-and-a-half-long boat tour that traverses the lake and points out the major features of the crater.
Here we get to get inside a volcano, see how it was formed, how it continues to shape the landscape here, and maybe get some clues about what might happen next. Here's Wizard Island. Wizard Island is a cinder cone volcano in the remnants of the collapsed volcano that we call Mount Mazama. Probably formed soon after the collapse of Mount Mazama, maybe within the first few hundred years. Today it stands about 764 feet above the level of Crater Lake. We are about to see the oldest rock exposed anywhere within the caldera. It's 400,000 years old, and we call it the Phantom Ship.
The Phantom Ship is an enormous ancient rock. Its trees belie the harshness of life in the crater. The little one on the end is over 100 years old.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you coming up here. The log that you see floating in the water ahead and just a little bit to the right of the boat is called the Old Man of the Lake. It's a piece of mountain hemlock about 40 feet long, most of it under the water obviously, floating vertically. This log has been floating vertically around in the lake for at least 100 years and maybe much longer than that.
Apparently the sap sealed the wood in such a way that it can't become waterlogged and sink to the bottom. It's a freak of nature.
It always helps, I think, to be taken out by an expert. So he was awfully good. Seeing that 40-foot tree floating vertically in the water was remarkable. And to think that it moved 6 miles here in the last 3 days or so, it's something you don't see in Chicago very often.
Almost 100 years after William Steele's vision of Crater Lake National Park became a reality, the park is thriving beyond his wildest dreams. Today, it's visited by nearly 500,000 people annually and is one of the most popular parks in the Pacific Northwest.
Areas like this are international treasures. They're unique and they're pristine and they're preserved for the education and scientific study and the enjoyment of the public.
I think all of us have a share in a common heritage, and that heritage is our natural resources base, and it's also our cultural and historic resource base. And that's why Crater Lake is such an important place, because it's part of our birthright that needs protecting.
Today, Crater Lake Lodge stands in its final glory, the elegant idea of a bygone era. While the historic structure no longer bears the ragged signs of aging, the heart of the lodge remains the same. It is still a wonder of man, perched on the edge of a wonder of nature.
I think the greatest gift that you get from Crater Lake is the opportunity to sit at this lodge, rocking chair out on the porch, and contemplate this place and realize how insignificant human beings really have been.
Explore the great lodges of the national parks and download a screensaver at PBS Online. Set your browser to pbs.org.
Production of Great Lodges of the National Parks was brought to you in part by M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.